So we're reading the Storm Runners. We're in the third quadrant, and we have just one little piece of the third quadrant left. We're reading Storm Runners, the third book, The Eruption, by Roland Smith. We're reading with permission by Scholastic. It's 7:05 p.m. John, Nicole, and Mark stepped above the tree line just after sunset. In front of them, Popocatépetl's plume shot up into the night sky, thousands of feet above the summit. "It looks close enough to touch," Nicole said with awe. I keep forgetting to look up how to pronounce that word. You guys figure out how to pronounce that word and help me learn it. "It's further away than you think," John said. "It just looks close because of its size." Mark started videotaping. "It would be a lot easier for you if you weren't lugging that camera," John said. "Do you see all the colors in the plume?" Mark asked, totally ignoring the suggestion. "We couldn't see them during the day, but at night it's like the 4th of July. "Lightning," Nicole said. "I see it," John said. Crackling white and gold bolts exploded through the plume like electrified spider webs. "Does lightning make you nervous?" Mark asked. John stared at the powerful column, remembering when Mama Rossi had said, "The lightning is still looking for you. It's going to find you again." Reflexively, his hand went up to his earring. "It should make me nervous," he admitted, "but for some reason it doesn't." Then he pulled his sat phone out as he said abruptly to Mark and Nicole, "Get your headlamps out of your go bags. We're going to need them to see where we're headed." He tried the phone. Still no signal. Tomas and Cindy had their headlamps on. They had reached the lake and were drinking cold water and washing the ash from their faces and hair. "I'm worried about that plume," Cindy said in Spanish. "The pressure is being relieved," Tomas replied in his native tongue. "It is good." "But what about the lava?" "There will be lava on the summit, but it is not a problem. It moves very slowly and hardens before it can reach Lagos. Mud flows from melting snow and ice. Earthquakes and flying rocks are what we have to worry about. When I was young, a rock the size of a school bus fell onto the village square. It was on a Sunday morning. Everyone was in church. No one died." Cindy pointed across the lake. "Are those fires?" Tomas nodded. "Campfires in the village square. It means people no longer have houses to return to. We should go." Chase stood beside 2 small beds in the orphanage. They were children's beds, but the adults occupying them did not fill their length. On his left was Mrs. Rossi. On his right was Nicole's sister Leah. Mrs. Rossi was unconscious. Leah was asleep. The village doctor had been tending to them when Father Al showed Chase into the girls' dormitory. The doctor finished his work, then turned to Chase and explained the extent of their injuries in English, almost as good as Father Al's. "Both women have broken ribs and severe concussions. Mrs. Rossi has 2 broken wrists, and there's some damage to her neck, but without an x-ray machine or CAT scan, I can't say how bad the injuries are. I've stabilized the women, but they need to be hospitalized. I have sedated Mrs. Rossi, and of course they are both on pain medication." He looked at Father Al. "How are the patients in the church?" "We lost Mrs. Ruiz," Father Al said sadly. The doctor nodded. "The medical supplies?" "Very low. We're down to the expired medications. We're boiling cloth in the square to make dressings." The doctor looked at his watch. "I better go check on the other patients." "And I need to see how the food supplies are holding up in the square," Father Al said. "I'll stay here," Chase volunteered. "One of the circus people is over in that corner sleeping," Father Al said, nodding to the man. Chase looked over. He hadn't noticed the man sprawled on the tiny bed in the dark corner with his knees hanging over the end. "I believe his name is Dennis," Father Al continued. "He's one of the circus clowns. They took turns caring for the Rossis while the others helped us search the rubble for survivors. The dog trainer even enlisted some of the poodles to help. The little dogs found 3 people we would have missed otherwise." The poodles were being kept in a large pen on the orphanage playground. The circus people had been asleep when Chase tiptoed up to put the little dog he had found in the pen with his friends. He thought the puppy might start barking and wake everyone, but he trotted over to his pile of fellow poodles sleeping in the corner and snuggled into them without a whimper. "If there are any problems, I'll be in the church," the doctor said. "When the girl wakes up, she will be thirsty. You can give her water, but not too much. There is a case of montaña under the bed. It's also important that she and her mother do not move. I've only been able to splint and wrap the broken bones. Undue movement could cause further damage. In fact," he reached into his pocket and pulled out some pills. If the girl wakes up, give her 2 of these. What are they? They're sedatives. Sedatives are things that make you sleep. But tell her they're antibiotics. She's been a little difficult, hard to keep down. I was thankful when she finally fell asleep. The best thing for her now is to rest. 7:26 p.m. John stopped and pulled the topo mag out of his go bag. A topo mag is a topographical map. It shows the rivers and the mountains and things like that. Are we lost? Mark asked. Not exactly, John answered. I just need to check on where we're going. What about the GPS? Nicole asked. You need a satellite signal to use the GPS. John pulled out a compass. We are lost, Mark said. Not as long as we keep the plume on our right. We're about here. He pointed to a spot on the map. Here's the lake and the village. Excuse me, my allergies are bothering me. He moved his finger. They're above the tree line, so we should be able to see them from this vantage point if they have the lights on. If they have electricity, Mark said. John nodded. That's the tricky part. If the power's out, Lago is going to be hard to spot, especially with all this ash floating around. They'll be using candles and lamps and have fires going in their houses. It's warm up here because of the plume, but down in the village, I'm betting it gets pretty cold when the sun goes down. I realize the plume is entertaining with colors and lightning, but we're going to have to concentrate our attention down the mountain to the left. If we miss Lago, we could end up circling the mountain clockwise. I'd prefer not to do that if that's possible. Circling the drain, Mark said. John laughed. I haven't heard that phrase in years, and you're right. If we miss the village, we'll be in big trouble. They started off again, looking down the mountain rather than up at the plume. John took the lead, followed by Mark and then Nicole. Being a competitive swimmer, Nicole had great stamina, but she was learning that walking sideways on a volcano was using muscles she didn't know she had. Her legs and joints were killing her. But what bothered her more than her aching muscles was that skinny Mark, who looked like he'd never seen the inside of a gym, was loping along behind John Masters with the ease of a mountain goat. And what about John Masters? She wouldn't be surprised if she saw him start flying. All he seemed to need was a sip of water and something to do, and he was good to go, seemingly forever. She was still terribly worried about her mother and Leah. And now Chase, she thought. I can't believe he got robbed in this desolate place. I just hope Tomas and Cindy have caught up to him and that he's okay. What if he's alone in the dark, maybe injured, maybe even... She stopped suddenly, took a step backward and shined her headlamp down to make sure, hoping her eyes hadn't been playing tricks on her in the dark. They weren't. Back here, she called out. John and Mark were about 30 feet ahead of her. Their headlamps turned in her direction. What is it? John asked. Don't tell me you found another chimp, Mark said, because this is the second time she's seen something they haven't, isn't it? You better come back. The men walked back to where she was standing. She hadn't moved an inch. Well, John said. Nicole shined her headlamp down. On the ground. Oh no, Mark said. They have bears here. That's not a bear track, Nicole said, her mouth suddenly dry. It's a tiger track. 7:45 p.m. Chase sat between Mrs. Rossi and Leah's beds, trying hard to stay awake. The last patient he had watched like this was his father. The doctor and nurses had begged him to go home, but he had stubbornly refused. The only time he left his father's hospital bed was to go to the bathroom. He'd even eaten his food in the chair next to the bed, willing his father to come out of the coma. Mrs. Rossi and Leah were pretty, like Nicole, the same black hair, the same complexion. With their eyes closed, he could only guess at their color, but he bet they were brown. Except for their height, it was obvious they were all related. Leah began to stir. Her eyes fluttered open. Chase smiled. Brown. Who are you? Leah asked. The blunt question startled him. He should have been thinking about what he was going to say in the event that she woke up. My name is Chase Masters. You're American. Yeah? What are you doing here? I'm a friend of Nicole's. My sister Nicole? She started to sit up and winced in pain. You better stay down. Okay, is there any water? Chase took a bottle of Montaña water out of the case beneath the bed. As he unscrewed the cap, he looked at the colorful label. It featured the lake, the church, and looming behind them, an erupting volcano. He gave Leah a sip. That's better, she said. Oh, the doctor wanted you to take these. He handed her the 2 pills. What are they? Antibiotics. He was off to a great start with Nicole's sister. He told himself it was for her own good, but that didn't make him feel any better about lying to her. She popped the pills into her mouth and washed them down. You say you're a friend of my sister's? We came down here to look for you after we heard about the earthquake. Leah's eyes went wide. Nicole is here? Not here, but she's, close. Chase had no idea where Nicole was. If they hadn't heard about the Rossis being in Lago, they were probably in Puebla by now. I must be dreaming, Leah said. Chase tried to explain, but it was difficult because he didn't want to tell her about the hurricane and losing her home. She had enough to worry about. When he finished the abridged story, abridged means shortened and cut up, she asked for another drink of water and seemed to be thinking about what he had told her. She turned her head and looked at her mother. How is she? She's, sedated. Leah nodded. We need to get her to a hospital. What are the chances of getting us out of here? Not real good at the moment. There's only one road in and it's impassable. Then how'd you get here? I climbed over the trucks, jammed in the gap. I wouldn't want to do that again. I bet. So your friend Tomas is from here and you two split up? Right. We ran into a landslide and I went ahead on a quad to figure out a way around the slide. He hadn't mentioned that he had gotten hit on the head and had everything stolen, including the quad. Tomas is Arturo's brother. Our Arturo? Chase nodded. And Nicole is with your dad on the way to Puebla? Or on their way back here if they got word that you and your mother are in Lago. He hadn't mentioned Cindy and Mark. That was way too complicated, and he didn't think that he understood why they were here himself. I'm still confused, Leah said. Actually, I'm shocked. It's not like my dad or my grandmother to let Nicole miss school or her swimming. Weekends are out too. She's a lifeguard at the local pool. Chase hadn't known Nicole was a lifeguard, but he wasn't surprised. He wished he'd never started this conversation. His mother would have called it a try. Not quite the truth, but not exactly a lie. Nice try, she used to tell him. I know most of Nicole's friends, Leah continued. I don't think I've ever met you. Here we go, Chase thought. I just moved to Palm Breeze. Why would your dad drop everything and come down here to help us? Actually, he came down here to help Tomas and his family. It just turned out you were down here too. I guess it was fate. Fate, huh? Chase shrugged. So what does your dad do for a living? Chase hesitated. He rescues people. That's a job? He used to be a Navy SEAL. Chase wasn't even sure this was true. Look, your dad said you'd be shocked when Nicole showed up down here. He said to tell you that Mama Rossi was convinced that Nicole had to come with us or bad things would happen. Leah smiled for the first time. You should have started with that, she said. What else did Mama Rossi have to say? Not much, Chase answered, relieved and wanting badly to keep a smile on Leah's face. She was a little distracted because of Pet's calf. Pet had her baby? Tell me about it. Chase described the birth, leaving out anything having to do with the hurricane. Leah's smile broadened with each detail. Dad must have been frantic. Chase was certain Marco Rossi had been beyond frantic, considering he'd been trying to get back to the farm for Pet's labor during a Category 5 hurricane. He was pretty excited, he said. Leah's smile turned to a yawn. Excuse me, she said. I don't know why I'm so tired. I've been sleeping for hours. Chase knew exactly why she was tired and hoped she would fall back asleep before she asked any more questions he couldn't answer without trying. He's definitely in front of us, Nicole said. He? Mark asked. The tigers on the show are all males. They had followed the track for at least 100 feet. The question is, how far ahead is he? John squatted down to take a closer look at the tracks. Pug marks are a little out of my expertise. Pug marks? Mark said. It would be nice if you guys spoke English. Pug comes from the Hindi word for foot, Nicole said. Hindi, as in India, where man-eating tigers are from? Mark asked. He's not a man-eater, Nicole said. Not yet, Mark said. What are circus tigers like? John asked. Nicole looked at the plume. The lightning was still crackling in the black funnel. Out of his cage, in the dark and in the wind of Hurricane Emily, the big lion, Simba, had been a completely different cat than he was on the show. Ferocious, aggressive, terrifying. Nicole shuddered. They're fine in their cages, she said, but out here the tiger will be confused and hungry. He might be injured. In other words, we're in deep trouble if we run into him, Mark said. It would be best if we didn't, Nicole agreed, although at some point the circus is going to have to try and get him back. We can't leave a tiger running around Mexico. John looked ahead into the darkness. Where do you think the tiger is going? Nicole followed John's gaze. I doubt even he knows.